And the tool we use to do that is a benchmark assessment. A benchmark assessment answers the question, are we on track to meet where students need to be by the end of the year? And there are scores that indicate if students are on track or not. And those scores are statistically calculated and used to correlate and predict future success. This is not an overview on understanding how benchmark assessments are created. Happy to answer those questions for you. But for today's purposes, we just need to understand that a benchmark is a special kind of assessment that says, are we on track? In elementary, this may be a Dibbles or an Acadience. In secondary, we don't always have benchmark assessments, but one thing we do have that tells us if we're on track is PVOS. The only problem is with a benchmark assessment like Acadience, we can administer that 3 times. We can only use the data from PVOS once to answer the question, are we on track? Benchmarks typically are administered 3 times a year, and we only get a PVOS report once a year. So let's start with this idea of a benchmark assessment. Are we on track? This is what the Firefly currently is designed to be. So we will have more options in the tested grades and tested subjects that are aligned specifically to Pennsylvania standards. When we get the benchmark data back, we're really trying to determine how healthy is our core. Some folks have looked at this and thought, I haven't had a chance to teach students yet when I administer a benchmark. And so I feel like that's not a fair assessment. I'm going to ask you to broaden your understanding of healthy core. At the beginning of a year when we administer a benchmark, it's really about, did students the prior year reach the intended targets? And was regression slowed enough that when they came back to us in the fall, they are right where they need to be on track to reach the next target? And how do we define a healthy core, no matter when a benchmark is given? When 80% of our students are proficient or advanced, and only 20% need more than the core can provide. Which means our core is not so healthy when we have less than 80% students proficient or advanced, and more than 20% need something in addition to the core, or as we refer to it, core plus. So looking at the numbers, that's what this looks like, an 80-20 split. And if you're thinking about it in terms of MTSS, 100% of the students get Tier 1. But we, in addition, layer on supplemental or intensive support, and that is for this 20%. When MTSS first arrived on the scene, we talked about single dips, double dips, and triple dips. This is how we can do that. We consider Tier 1 their first dip, and we got to make it a good one. So let's talk prevention. How can we make sure our Tier 1 is the strongest it can be so that we can achieve these types of results? In a healthy core, what we can do is have Tier 1 teachers who are providing high quality core instruction to all our students and reinforcing the areas where students are evidencing that they're falling behind. Even if 80% of our students are benchmark or above, proficient or advanced, those proficient students are still considered low risk. We've had students from one administration to the next lose ground. So the Tier 1 teacher is constantly layering in new instruction at that grade level and trying to keep at least that 80% moving forward. And communicating to anyone who's providing something in addition to the core what they're doing, so that transfer of skills can happen both from Tier 1 to the intervention and from intervention to Tier 1. That's where the advanced tier teacher comes in. They're providing targeted intervention and progress monitoring for the at-risk students and the high-risk students. So those are the ones typically working below or well below benchmark. And so the advanced tier teacher needs to communicate to the classroom teacher, here's the intervention we're doing, here's what we're doing, here's how you might be able to incorporate it into what you're doing in the classroom so that this student sees us as a coordinated team and not as two separate entities that never talk. And therefore, students start to question, what does one have to do with the other? That should never be a question for our students. Let's talk numbers. The goal is always 80-20. 90-10 would be nice too. But the reality is sometimes it's like 50-30-20, meaning 50% of our students are proficient and advanced, 50% of our students are falling below. Or worse, a 40-20-40 split. So what do? Can we intervene for 50 or 60% of our students? Can we really put the right resources behind supporting that large number of students in an intervention setting? And the answer is no, we can't. So what do? We always plan for that bottom 20%. And any students who fall between the proficient and advanced and that bottom 20%, this now becomes the group that when we're looking at Tier 1 data, we're saying, what are the skills that these kiddos are missing? How can we catch them up to this group? Because now our core is not working to its most effective and efficient level. What's that look like for Tier 1 teachers and advanced tier teachers? Well, the difference here is that Tier 1 teachers still providing good core instruction for all the students and reinforcing the core. It's just the reinforcements they're doing may be slightly lower on the continuum than what they're used to. And some of you might say, well, if they're doing that, we're going to have students who are proficient or advanced who are bored. Remember, proficient students are still low risk. So we need to make sure that we are targeting skills that are specific to this in-between group of students, and it will help our entire class and grade level to move forward. As a classroom teacher, if you're looking at data to drive the instructional decision-making in your classroom, and then you go to this system approach, you may find that you're not experiencing this need by yourself. And now you have a group of colleagues who can put their heads together and say, what is the most effective and efficient way we can reteach and reinforce this skill so we can move through what students need systematically and get them caught up as soon as possible. Because the advanced tier teachers are still going to be providing intervention and progress monitoring to your lowest 20%.